I've recently played through Kanto, using only the most common Pokemon in that region. So now it's time to do the same in Hoenn with Pokemon Emerald. To determine which are the most common Pokemon, I simply add up all of their encounter rates in every area, including their evolutions, and call this number the common rate. Since there is so much water in Hoenn, I divide the fishing rod encounters by 3 to account for the different types of rods. But which Pokemon do you think are among the 6 most common in this region? Let's get started. Professor Birch tries to do some field research, but fails miserably and requires some help from a 10-year-old. Not much of a scientist there, are ya? Because I know what team I'll end up with, I choose Mudkip to make the rival battles a bit more difficult. Once I'm free to move, I encounter a Zigzagoon on Route 101, who is actually much less common in Emerald compared to Ruby and Sapphire. In contrast, Poochyena is one of the most common walking encounters in Emerald, with a 413 common rate, which is still not enough to make an appearance in this video. She was just 2 spots shy. Not Common and I easily beat up May's Trico, and were forced to watch Wally catch a Ralts, who has a whopping 4 common rate. That's the exact opposite of this video's theme. On Route 104, we get our first real encounter, Wingull. They're not too common walking, but when you add surfing encounters, he is the 4th most common Emerald Mon, with a 1394 common rate. The other water Mon here, Meryl, is also a fairly common surfing encounter, but with a 704 common rate, she just barely doesn't make it on the team. Four Eyes easily gets through the Petalburg Woods and their not very common Pokemon, immediately fighting Roxanne once we get to Rustboro. He is a bit underleveled, but they're rock types. How hard could this be? Both Geodudes immediately fall to a water gun, as expected, but Nosepass chooses to not roll over and die, instead one-shotting my bird with Rock Tomb. Well, that was mighty unfair. Clearly, I need to level up a tad, and the Route 116 trainers oblige me with some experience. 3 levels later, Wingull still loses to Nosepass, but I was a lot closer this time. Losing so frequently in these runs can get a bit depressing, but that's where this video's sponsor, BetterHelp, comes in. I know I like to keep things lighthearted around here, but being on top of your mental health is vital, since it impacts all areas of your life. When I was in college, longer ago than I'd care to admit, I was really struggling with depression. Life was just not going the way I had expected. I felt alone and like nobody cared. Even though that wasn't actually true, my brain convinced me that it was. Thankfully, my university had therapists on campus I could talk to, and let me tell you, it was a huge help. In both individual and group sessions, I learned strategies to effectively manage those negative thoughts and feelings. Sometimes you just can't do it alone, and that's okay. BetterHelp makes finding the right therapist easier than ever, and you don't even have to leave your house, or your mom's basement, as the case may be. Once you fill out a questionnaire, you'll be matched with a therapist in as little as a couple of days. You can even switch therapists anytime for free if it's not the right fit. If you've been on the fence about trying therapy, or just feel like it could be helpful, now is the time to get started. Click the link in the description, or go to betterhelp.com/Nuzlocke to get 10% off your first month of therapy. On the 3rd attempt, a single Rock Tomb misses, and Roxanne uses Block for some reason. That combination of luck allows Four Eyes to defeat the first gym, finally. I thought that gym was supposed to be easy with a water type. Old Man with a boat enlists my aid in saving his Pokemon, which I'm not thrilled about, to be honest. This is disrupting my goal to catch the common Pokemon. But his Wingull was bird-napped, and Four Eyes will not stand for that. After all, birds of a feather give each other free boat rides. Before I can take him up on this offer, May shows up and tries to make this duo a trio with her own Wingull. But as everyone knows, bros before, not bros. In other words, no girls allowed. Four Eyes has no sympathy against her Wingull or even her Trico. Get out of here, you girl. Once it's just the boys, we take this party boat over to Dewford where the real party begins, thanks to another dude handing over his decrepit old fishing rod. Naturally, the first mon I fish up is Magikarp. Since fishing encounter totals are divided by 3 in this run, Magikarp only has a common rate of 2,353, putting him in 2nd place. The first place mon is also right here in Dewford, none other than a Tentacool, with a 2,600 common rate. She is much less common of a fishing encounter, but can be found basically everywhere while surfing. And you might have realized by now, Hoenn has a boatload of water. so naturally, she is number 1. And if you want to be the number 1 viewer on my newest videos, make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you get more awesome Pokemon content like this. Before facing Brawly, I might as well get another encounter, but this one is not wet. In Granite Cave, you can find a Makuhita, who aren't even close to being common anywhere else, but surprise surprise, the Cave Bat is. Zubat is the 3rd most common Emerald Mon with a 1750 common rate. Most of that is cave walking, but surprisingly, there are some water encounters too. With 2 flying Mons, one who is also a poison type, Brawly certainly stands no chance. 4 Eyes wing attacks Machop in a few hits, while Medicham tries and fails to focus. The fat Makuhita almost takes out Wingull with a super-powered reversal, but he gets a crit water gun at the most opportune time, staying alive and earning another badge. Since most of my team are water types, I kind of see where Team Aqua is coming from here. Water types are the most common after all. Don't they deserve more space to swim around? I'm not sure how effective my water mons are going to be since all of these battles are on land, but it's fine, I'm sure. May's Wingull, again, is worse than mine, no problem. Her Slugma decides to ruin my streak by yawning, no fair, meaning it's time for Tentacool. She has no water moves just yet, but does no cut. Grovyle takes basically nothing from Poison Sting, but does get poisoned at least. Now Tri-Wing the Zubat still doesn't know Wing Attack, it's a few levels away, though she can always Leech Life and barely win. Wally again shows off his super rare Pokemon, which nobody wants to see. Get it through your privileged head, man. Some of us are just commoners. In a vain attempt to make the Wattson battle, well, doable, Tri-Wing and Garatu evolve. The only problem is, all of my Mons are weak to Electric, some doubly so. Wattson's Voltorb goes kamikaze on me, which worked out in my favor. Tri-Wing falls to Electrike after a bite, and Garatu defeats it with some tackles. But that's as far as we go. Manectric then proceeds to Shockwave the rest of my team, not particularly surprising. On the next attempt, I can't even get past the orb, so certainly not an improvement. Plan A for this battle, which consisted of throwing electric weak Pokemon at Wattson hoping for a miracle, doesn't seem to be working. Instead, let's move to Plan B, forcing Tri-Wing to like me enough to evolve. With Black Glasses, the newly evolved Bat does pretty well, defeating Voltorb in a few bites, but then she gets paralyzed. We then have a repeat of last time, with Manectric destroying the rest of my team. Okay, on to Plan C, which has 2 major parts. First is an evolved 4 Eyes, which did absolutely nothing. The next part is a Dragon Raging Gyarados, who is the last living member on this attempt. 2 hits, and finally Manectric is defeated. Of course, Wattson still has a Steel Magneton, which is where Dragon Rage really comes in handy, knocking out the Magnet and beating Wattson finally. The one good thing about having an almost pure water team
all my Pokemon are water type
is that Team Magma is really easy to throw down. Crobat easily defeats Maxie's Mightyena, but then needs to rely on Tentacool for Zubat. She has since learned Bubble Beam, making her an actually useful Pokemon. This is the first special attacking move she has learned after all. She's so good, as a matter of fact, that I doubt I'll need anyone else against Flannery. 3 of her Mons are knocked out with a single Bubble Beam hit. Torkoal survives, does paralyze with Body Slam, but I totally saw that coming. And she is promptly knocked out too. That was way easier than Wattson. I wish Tentacool had evolved right after that awesome battle, but she was still 1 level shy. She evolves a little bit later, as we head over to fight my dad, where she absolutely destroys his pathetic Spinda. Vigoroth at least does something before being bubble beamed to death. She even beats Lanoon thanks to a lucky crit. Against Slacking, she tries and fails to Toxic. Still, she made it way farther than expected. Cue Gyarados to Rock Smash, lowering Slacking's defense, and return a few times for the knockout. Yeah, that's right, man. You lost to my super common Mons. After getting not a bribe from Wally's family, which, by the way, if you have to say it's not a bribe, it most certainly is, I teach Surf to basically my whole team. While I could technically get another encounter here, I'm instead going to wait. I'll explain why later. Either way, I am gifted a cast form at the Weather Institute. Technically, there is a 100% chance you get cast form in Hoenn, but since it's not a wild random encounter, it doesn't technically have a common rate, so I won't use it here. Though I will steal his Mystic Water and give it to Tentacruel. Tentacruel actually has 2 new moves now, Surf of course, but she has also learned Sludge Bomb, meaning May is quickly defeated, no problem. It took me a while to realize just how good a Tentacruel could be. I grew up hating how often you find these things in Kanto, but they're actually pretty good Pokemon. I start with her again to surf Winona's Swablu. I meant to give her Ice Beam as well, but since I forgot, it's time for Crobat to confuse Ray and wing attack Altaria. Tropius is Wung out too, while Tentacruel comes back out to Sludge Bomb Pelipper. Skarmory is then surfed a few times for the win in yet another easy gym battle. With that badge under my belt, it's finally time for the 6th most common Mon. In Emerald, it just so happens to be Shuppet, with an 820 common rate. And I finally have a Mon who isn't weak to Electric. Not that it really matters at this point. There is a final rival battle here in Lily Cove, but there's not much to comment on, other than again pointing out how great Tentacruel is right now. She's easily becoming my new ace. And after Maxie scares away Groudon, I release the Kraken again to utterly destroy his Pokemon. I try to do the same thing to Archie, but he steals a sub and drives away? Subs away? I don't actually know the verb for manning a sub. Either way, he escapes and subs away a second time. Before getting our final Mon, I want to beat another gym leader, Z. Tentacruel and our newest member team up to begin with, but Banette is quickly knocked out. So much for Ghost being super effective against psychic types. Instead, I used a time-tested strategy of surfing with 2 water Pokemon. Back in Gen 3, Surf doesn't hit your own Pokemon, so it works out quite well. I then team up with Steven so that together we defeat Team Magma once and for all. I'm using together in that sentence very loosely, by the way. Tentacruel does the vast majority of the work. Alright, we've waited long enough. It's time for the final Pokemon. Let's get the Super Rod first and start fishing. As a quick aside, and to slightly delay the reveal just a tad more, I want to complain really quickly about Hoenn's fishing rods. In Gen 3 Kanto, I use the rod a single time, and that's it. Either I get a fish, or I don't. In Hoenn, they made it into a crappy little minigame that nobody likes. I'm sitting here, like a fool, pressing the button 6 freaking times just to get a little whale? It doesn't seem worth it. But Wailmer is the final most common Hoenn Pokemon with a 936 common rate, coming in at number 5. I could have gotten one earlier with a good rod, but Super Rod Pokemon tend to be higher leveled, and since I got him at level 39, he evolves like 2 minutes later. Archie is defeated quite easily too, and these 2 not common Pokemon have a showdown in the middle of Sutopolis. That's kind of rude. To stop them, I get the even less common Pokemon here to tell them to knock it off. I'm hoping to use the final gym battle as a way to show off how versatile Banette can be. In other words, I'ma try to spam Thunderbolt. It works at first, till Juan sends out his ground fish. Pelipper needs to come out to surf it. Gyarados gets paralyzed by Celio's Body Slam, but still returns it. Since Kingdra is going to spam Double Team, I return to Banette to use Curse. She dies to Water Pulse, and eventually, Wailord hits enough times with Return and Rock Smash to defeat Kingdra, even though it used Rest like 5 times first. In Victory Road, Little Privileged Wally wants another crack at us, but this time he's full of even more rare Pokemon, like Altaria, who Tentacruel immediately Ice Beams. Gardevoir is Shadow Balled by Banette, and Delcatty is Thunderbolt twice. Roselia is also Shadow Balled, but Banette meets her match against the Steel-type Magneton. Ghost was not very effective against Steel in Gen 3. You know what is though? Earthquake. Good job, Gyarados. That brings us to the Pokemon League. None of my Mons can learn any powerful fighting or bug moves, so let's just start with the Kraken. Mightyena is defeated in a few hits as Tentacruel heals a bit with Shell Bell. Shiftry falls to a crit Sludge Bomb, no problem. Cacturn is also sludged, but since he Leech Seeded first, it's time to unrelease the Kraken. Banette knows Thunderbolt to easily zap Crawdont. She gets pulled back, cursing all the way, so Tentacruel can finish what she started with a single surf. Against Phoebe and her ghosts, I lead with one of the few non-water Mons I have. Dusclops tries to confuse Banette, but a Person Berry prevents that from mattering. Banette's 2 uglier twins are Shadow Balled each, and even the second Dusclops falls to my ghost. Since she clearly won't beat Sableye, she sacrifices herself with some foul language, and Triwing just stalls out Sableye with a fly, letting Curse do all the work. For Glacia, Banette again leads the charge, this time to Thunderbolt Celio. I pivot to Tentacruel to tank a crunch from Glalie, responding with a couple of surfs. Banette returns to again Thunderbolt. This time Tri-Wing tries to Steel Wing Glalie, doesn't do a ton, but is Ice Beamed in return. A few heals later, Gyarados' Hyper Beam defeats the spiky Ice Ball. And before he can do anything here, Walrein sheer colds like a jerk. That's how you want to play it? Fine. I hope you like this curse. Might as well Toxic him too, just for fun. Pelipper uses Protect for perhaps the first time this video, and does just enough to beat Walrein. We haven't used Wailord in the Elite Four yet, so let's give him a chance against Drake. He avoids a Rock Tomb, which is pretty awesome, actually. Not sure how you miss a giant whale with rocks, but still. And Ice Beam Shelgon to death in between Protects. Altaria is similarly Ice Beamed after a Double Edge. He does a bit of damage to Kingdra, but not all that much. Unlike Gyarados. Though his Reign of Terror is short-lived too. That's not a problem. I still have several Ice Beam Mons, like Tentacruel, obviously. Flygon is outsped, and also falls, beating Drake without too much trouble, all things considered. With him gone, it's time to rare candy up my Mons. Everyone gets one, but Gyarados needs a few extra to learn his incredible move, Dragon Dance. I will try to beat Wallace without it though, just to see how it goes.
A few moments later.
Well, that didn't work out so well. Okay, time to be cheap. Though he could get away with more, I think 2 Dragon Dances at the start should be plenty for most of this battle. Too bad Milotic uses Toxic, so now it's a race against the Poison Clock. Ludicolo ruins his Rampage, having the audacity to survive a return and then heal, in between his double teams. Gyarados still knocks him out, but that's as far as he goes. Pelipper and Whiscash trade surfs back and forth. Thankfully he doesn't use Amnesia, so I win. Pelipper is ready for Gyarados with a Shockwave, but never gets a chance to use it. No matter, Banette has Thunderbolt, making Wallace waste all of his full restores on his very last Pokemon. This is pointless, dude. You know that, right? With that somewhat anticlimactic end, my team of the most common Pokemon in Hoenn have officially beaten the game, and I have become the champion. But I obviously can't end it there, not with Steven using a bunch of rare Pokemon thinking he's the best. I will admit, here I did cheat to increase all of my Pokemon's levels by exactly 20. I typically don't cheat with rare candies in these types of runs, but there was no way I was going to train that long. I couldn't give Steven the satisfaction. His Steel Bird hits Banette with a crit and succumbs to Thunderbolts. Steven immediately sends out Metagross, so Banette once again sacrifices herself. Wailord stalls for a bit, doing some damage, but not quite enough. Right as Gyarados is about to knock it out, Steven swaps to Claydol like a jerk. Alright, Pelipper defeats it in 2 surfs while getting Ancient Power. Armaldo also Ancient Powers because they love throwing rocks at my bird. Tentacruel defeats the Rocky Bug and the Steely Rock with surfs. Unfortunately, she cannot stand up to Metagross's Earthquake, being a poison type and all. We're down to our last 2 Pokemon, but one of them is a Gyarados, so we should be okay, right? Metagross gets a taste of his own shaky medicine. Steven's last Pokemon is Cradily, who tanks a couple of Earthquakes, and also Ancient Powers my other Water-Flying Mon. This means it's all down to Tri-Wing, not who I would have chosen at the most vital part of the run, but hey, beggars can't be anti-Crobat. She starts with a Confuse Ray, hoping for the best. Ingrain was not the best, but between Confusion hits, a Fly, and then a single Poison Fang right at the end, Crobat was actually able to do it, defeating the final Hoenn trainer. Good for you. And now, we're done. It's fun going through these regions, trying to find the most common Pokemon. But since I still had way too many water types, I will likely revisit the Hoenn region with only walking encounters and see what we get. If you're interested in that, make sure you're subscribed, and I'll see you in the next region.